she went to residential treatment, she started to make some improvements there, but the improvements she was making there were more of that because she was more in control, and she didn't have to have any attachment or relationships, and so she was making some improvement there. But the longer she was there, the farther we saw her away from us, and it was like she was at camp, and that wasn't okay for me. That, you know, being behind locked doors and not being in a home setting, and staff changing every couple of hours and other clients coming and going, and she was happy to be there. She actually enjoyed it. That was a big concern, of knowing that we weren't healing what needed to be healed with her. So we found the Institute for Attachment and Child Development, and it just hit home to everything we felt like she needed as her parents, and it really just felt like we have to get her there, almost for our survival, and for her survival. So I started mentioning it to the county and to Medicaid. Of course, they don't contract, and I just kept hearing that through social workers, through every Medicaid, whatever outlet I would try to go through and talk with the county. Then I received a call that the Institute actually had an opening, because I kept researching the Institute for Attachment and Child Development, knowing in my heart that this is where my daughter needed to be. And so when I got the call that there was an opening, to me it felt like, this is it. This is our one shot, and this has gotta work. And we just happened to have a staffing the next day at the residential. And I had mentioned it to her therapist there a couple of times, and she said it sounded interesting, but she wasn't really familiar with this style of treatment and stuff. So of course she can't really say a lot about it because she wasn't informed on it. But we all agreed that the residential wasn't the place for her, because it was like camp. And they talked about maybe a group home and stuff like that, but I just kept saying, but that's the same thing. The staff will always be changing, the kids will always be changing, and we're not getting to the core of where her healing needs to begin. But I learned very quickly that the supervisor who was on our case for our social worker, her supervisor was sitting in, and she let me know that, you know, this is not something that the county will pay for. Her GAL, the guardian ad litem, also agreed that, no, this is not something that county or Medicaid does. Went home, immediately called Medicaid, and they said, of course we'll contract with him, but they have to accept our price, which is not feasible to treat these kids. So I knew at that moment, I asked Medicaid, who do I need to talk to? How do we get this changed? This isn't okay. And she really didn't even have an idea. She said, it's just the system. It's just how it is. And I can't accept that for any of my children, that's just how it is when you know it's a life or death situation. I cannot accept that that's just the system. So I then decided, okay, you know, you always learn, kind of climb the ladder and go to the next one in charge. And I didn't have that time because the spot that was open was for a limited time. So I went directly to the top and started working backwards. So I contacted the Director of Human Services through email. It was the longest email I've ever written. Not in length, but I spent probably at least 6 hours composing that email because it was for our life. So I had one chance to get this attention of this director, to hear our story, and to know that it is important. And so not making it all about RAD and not making it all about us, but how can we work together as a system? I presented it to him as, this is the need, here's the solution, how do we work it together? And with that, I also found out that in my researching of what the county was paying for my daughter to be in residential was very close to what it was going to cost for her to be here at the Institute for Attachment and Child Development. So when I found out that the cost was very similar, again, that was not okay for me to not let this opportunity to go by. So in my email, I also stated that you know, the price is so close that I cannot, you're already covering this cost for the Institute, or for residential, please cover this cost for the Institute for Attachment and Child Development. He then referred me down to the Director of Child Protective Services, which I think got a little bit more attention, because now when you're getting an email from your boss, you're more apt to look at it than if you're getting an email from one of your workers that you supervise, because these people are very busy. Our social workers are, I have so much respect for them, and so in any way, shape, or form, I am not blaming Child Protective Services. They are overworked and underpaid, but in the situation, it was screaming, we need help, and I am finding solutions for you. We just need to figure out how to get this to work. I contacted the contract supervisor through the county, kept asking her, why can't you contract? What is it? Why can't you do it? She was trying to get Medicaid on board. I don't think Medicaid was willing to get on board with it. But needless to say, the county came together and they agreed to pay for my daughter to come here. And so we just feel very blessed. And we were willing to continue that fight. If they also would have said, no, we cannot, then we were prepared to also take them back to court and ask for another hearing and see if we could have got the judge to order it. Based on the price that they were already paying for residential. Because how that works, when she was in residential, Medicaid was covering her treatment in residential, but the county was paying her shelter cost. So by us going the route of the county saying we cannot take her home and then placing her, they were responsible for paying her shelter cost, whether that be to a foster parent, to a group home, or to a residential center. And so between the cost of what they were paying for shelter for the residential center was very close to the cost here. I would definitely advise other parents to document everything. If a therapist says to you, RAD is so difficult, we just really don't know what we're doing, get that in writing. If a therapist says to you, this child needs more care, get that in writing. If the doctor says, we don't know where we're going, get that in writing. Document everything, document every behaviors at home. Have everything documented to show that you are doing everything in your power to help this child. After you're documenting everything, for us, we had hit that point of crisis. For me personally as a mom, I couldn't do another day. I was so broken myself. I was deep in it. Prayer wasn't helping me. Self-care wasn't helping me. There was nothing I could do to take good care of myself to continue to parent my daughter. We were that thick in it. RAD had taken over our house. And like I said before, we had no choice but to fight for our survival. Literally, our survival. So it's not because I had strength. It's not because I was so well rested and my RAD child was doing great at the moment, so I had this time to compose these emails and find documentation. No, it was because I was desperate. I was desperate. I was crawling on my hands and knees, begging anybody and everybody to please help. And that's what got us through. Fighting for my daughter with RAD, fighting for my other children who have the effects of RAD, fighting for myself, fighting for my husband, fighting for our family unit. It's very sad that it has to be that way. I think that we all enter this, my whole life, all I ever wanted to be was a mom. I remember in elementary school, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I kept thinking a mom. Okay, maybe a teacher, something like that, because I could be around kids. And so I just really wanted to be a mom. And adopting was one of those callings, and having my daughter was, we felt like it's a true blessing. But it's so hard when you have to go back and ask for help from the county, and the feedback you get is, well, you're going to be charged, and I really feel that they do that to scare us, to scare us from saying we need help. But like I said, we were in the thick of it, and if it meant that I got charges and my daughter was removed and taken away from us, that's what it meant if we needed to get her care that way.